Who is the single biggest enemy of cryptocurrency? Well, in the light of recent events, Sam Bankman-Fried probably has the strongest claim to that title, with the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler duking it out for second place. Peter Schiff and Warren Buffett would give them a good run for their fiat money. And let's face it, all of the above are just the tip of a big old iceberg. But there's one man who's ultimately responsible for causing crypto more harm than all the rest of them combined. A man who's authorized the theft of billions and wreaked havoc on the industry numerous times. A man whose nefarious deeds threaten not just crypto, but the safety of the entire world. A man whose name is Kim Jong-un. That's right. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader and dictator of North Korea, the reclusive communist state that's one of the most terrifying, mysterious, and inaccessible places on Earth. A country that has oppressed and terrorized its own people for decades, that remains sealed off from the outside world, and an implacable enemy of the United States and its allies. A country that has one of the largest militaries on the planet, is still officially at war with its neighbour, and, most worryingly of all, now possesses nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons that are being paid for, in large part, by crypto. So, in this, the first of a two-part video, I'm going to give you a bit of background on Kim Jong-un, the hellish country he rules over, and its nuclear weapons program. So, stay tuned to find out how the young dictator Donald Trump once dubbed Little Rocket Man may be taking us anywhere but to the moon. Now, to my mind, few pictures can tell more of a story than this NASA satellite photograph of the Korean peninsula by night. South Korea, one of the most technologically advanced societies on Earth, is a blaze of light as its population of over 51 million people reap the benefits of decades of economic prosperity. South Korea boasts the 13th largest economy in the world by GDP. Its citizens enjoy an average life expectancy of 83.5 years, the third highest in the world, and in recent years its cultural influence has become increasingly significant too. Yep, the bottom part of NASA's image shows one of the success stories of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Compare that with the almost empty space above. North Korea could not be more different from its southern counterpart. The country is in almost complete darkness, save for a small splodge of light around its capital, Pyongyang. Its population of just over 26 million has an average life expectancy of 72.9 years, 109th in the world, and lives under the yoke of perhaps one of the most repressive dictatorships in history. It's almost impossible to get into or out of North Korea without the state's permission, and decades of Western sanctions and mismanagement by the regime have left it an economic basket case. Ordinary North Koreans endure malnourishment and often starvation. Their lives are rigidly controlled by the state, which brutally punishes even the slightest transgression. And an almost total media blackout means few are even vaguely aware of what life is like for the rest of the world. Since the end of the Korean War in 1953, it's been run by successive generations of the same all-powerful family. Kim Il-sung assumed power after the war, passed the country on to his son, Kim Jong-un, yes, of Team America fame, who died in 2011 and was succeeded by his son, the current ruler, Kim Jong-un. That is what you call a despotic dynasty, and the Kims have managed to hold on to power for this long by being utterly ruthless, paranoid, and self-aggrandizing. It's as if all three of them have, at different points, read George Orwell's 1984 and thought to themselves, yup, that is how you run a country, all right. Better get my best boots on and go stamp on someone's face for the rest of the afternoon. Now, in order to maintain their grip on North Korea and its people, the Kims have kept the country almost completely isolated from the rest of the world for decades. Hence, it's often referred to as the Hermit Kingdom. North and South Korea are separated by perhaps the most fortified border in the world, and the only countries that the North has any meaningful interactions with these days are its other neighbours, China and Russia. Since the 1990s, the Kims have also enforced a policy known as Songun, or military first, which means the country's armed forces are prioritised above pretty much anything else. As a result, North Korea is the most militarized society on Earth, with well over 1 million personnel actively serving in its armed forces, with another 6 million or so reservists. Remember that the overall population is only 26 million. North Korea sees this extraordinary military might as vital to its survival, believing that the United States, South Korea and their allies would like nothing better than to restart the Korean War, which never officially ended, no peace treaty was ever signed, and enslave all North Koreans under the yoke of decadent Western capitalism. Now, historically, the North has flexed its muscles with immaculately choreographed, slightly ludicrous and yet also deeply unnerving military parades, designed to not so subtly remind the rest of the world that picking a fight with Kim and his scary toys is, well, inadvisable. There are also frequent missile tests and other weapons demonstrations conducted with the same effect in mind. And there's no denying that this policy has been successful, insofar as 3 generations of Kims have been able to rule unchallenged from either within or without. Nothing is more important for dictators than self-preservation, and most don't get to hand their power on to their sons, let alone their grandsons. While North Korea enjoys a political stability that is rare elsewhere, the cost of this is paid for by its people, who essentially live inside a vast prison camp and enjoy almost none of the freedoms that most of us take for granted. The country ticks all the boxes of a classic tyrannical state. A network of hard labour camps for dissidents, an active and sophisticated propaganda machine, a surveillance apparatus ready to pounce on the slightest transgression, guns, lots of guns, well, the list goes on and on. Now, to support these internal controls, the outside world is deliberately kept shut out by the regime, and with good reason. If North Korean people knew what life was really like for people elsewhere, especially in the enemy country just a few miles to the south, they'd naturally be inclined to wonder why they put up with a constant shortage of food, state repression, and few, if any, of the perks of modern life. It's essentially an extension of Orwell's idea of Newspeak in 1984. In that book, the English language was in the process of being deliberately simplified and reduced so that people didn't even have the words to conceptualize their discontent, let alone voice it. North Korea works in a similar way. If its people cannot even conceive of a different way of life elsewhere, they're unlikely, even unable, to imagine their lives being any different or any better. By keeping the North Korean people in the dark, metaphorically and literally, and by waving some extremely large weapons at the rest of the world, these 3 generations of Kims have managed to establish a dynasty of tyranny which is unprecedented in modern times. Now, of course, the problem with being cut off from the rest of the world means you're also cut off from international trade, which makes it very difficult to earn any money. Almost nothing in the way of imports or exports means North Korea has to be largely self-sufficient. And for a country that's neither particularly large nor blessed with abundant arable land to grow food on, that hasn't worked out so well of late. North Korea's problems became particularly acute in the 1990s following the collapse of the Soviet Union, which had been its staunchest supporter and largest trading partner since the Korean War. The Soviets had propped up Kim Il-sung's regime for many years, and the disappearance of this key ally was a disaster for North Korea. The 90s in general were a rough time for the country. Kim Il-sung died in 1994, prompting 3 years of national mourning. He was succeeded by Kim Jong-il, who then had to cope with widespread flooding, which ruined harvests and led to widespread famine. Somewhere between 250,000 and 420,000 people are thought to have died as a result. The situation was so bad that the UN was eventually allowed to deliver food aid. You can imagine no dictator wants to be seen to be accepting handouts from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, North Korea's long-standing aggressive foreign policy against South Korea and unwavering opposition to the United States meant heavy sanctions only added to the burden imposed by its own isolationist policies. So, what do you do if you perceive pretty much the whole world to be against you, lack the resources to feed your own people, and your economy has barely evolved since the 1950s? That's right. You embark on a nuclear weapons program. Yes, for the last couple of decades, North Korea has been developing nuclear weapons in a bid to attain the ultimate protection against military aggression and to elevate its status within the international community. Because no matter how poor and isolated you may be, when you've got nukes, other countries have no choice but to take you seriously. It's why Iran is going down the nuke route too, in spite of the sanctions such a move has inevitably brought upon it. Civilization-ending bombs are simply a must-have accessory for any despotic regime. While Kim Jong-il was the man who got North Korea started on its journey toward nuclear weapons, it's his son Kim Jong-un who has really supercharged the program and made North Korea a member of the Nuclear Weapons Club of Nations. Thanks to Kim Jong-un and his father's efforts, and despite international condemnation, sanctions and veiled threats from the likes of Donald Trump, North Korea not only possesses the capability to build and fire nuclear weapons, but also to deliver them across great distances aboard long-range missiles. This threatens not only its near neighbours like South Korea and Japan, but also the mainland United States. It's a truly terrifying prospect and represents one of the greatest threats to global security. But how is it possible for such a small, otherwise backward nation to achieve this level of capability? Okay, so by now you're probably thinking, yes, Guy, this is all very interesting and also pretty terrifying, but what has it got to do with crypto? Surely we have our own megalomaniac with dodgy hair to worry about already. Do we really need Kim Jong-un on our plate as well? It's a good question, and well, put simply, North Korea's nuclear weapons program is now believed to be being funded in large part by the theft of cryptocurrency. 2022 has seen some of the biggest DeFi hacks on record, and it's more than likely that many of those hacks have been conducted on behalf of North Korea, with the stolen funds funneled back to the Kim regime to spend on weapons of mass destruction. That, my friends, is something we should all be concerned about. So, who exactly is behind these hacks, and what does all this mean for crypto? Well, you'll have to wait till part 2 of this video to find out.